So we invoke his blessings as we continue on this Gita journey. Om.
Om.
Om. Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Fulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamayah Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Vridaduhe Namaha. Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. Again, welcome everyone to our 30th session today. Today is our Guruji Swami Tejomananda's birthday, so we invoke his grace and blessings on all of us as we continue on this Bhagavad Gita journey. So we are looking at the chapter 2. Today we are entering into another section of the chapter 2, which is again a beautiful section on the lakshanas of a man of perfection or a woman of perfection or a person of perfection. So we are looking at that. And as always, in the reflection time, I want to jog our memory with a few of the concepts that we have been studying. So starting with the very first one, the two yoga phrases that we saw were, if you can name them, and I hope you don't say it's Hatha Yoga, because we're not talking about the yoga of the physical, but what were the two yoga phrases that we have seen so far?
Karma Yoga.
Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is the, well, this is the phrase that I'm asking. So Karma Yoga is definitely also the name of the yoga, which then, well, first of all, yoga comes from the root yuj, which means to yoke. It's yoking our lower to the higher. So Karma Yoga is definitely the yoga which is about the yoga of action, where our physical self is involved. But there were two kind of nice yoga phrases that we saw so far.
Is it Karma Kaushalam Yoga?
Yes, it is Yoga Kaushalam. Yeah, that is one of them. And the second one?
Samatvam Yoga.
Yes, it is Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. Exactly. So Samatvam Yoga Uchyate, indicating, does anybody remember what Samatvam means?
Vairagyam.
Not necessarily Vairagya, but Samatvam indicates, Sama means evenness.
Evenness.
So Samatvam indicating the evenness of our mind, no matter what kind of situation I face in life. So we talked about how the kinds of situations that we face in life are always, the two extremes of the neutral thing. And next week, I'm going to actually have a nice graph which is going to show this. Today was still not the time for it. But the evenness is not being too elated, being overjoyous, or not being too, depressed about things. So being even-minded in all situations. So samatvam yoga uchyate. And the second one, as Avinash mentioned, it is yoga karmasu kaushalam. So we already talked about samatvam yoga uchyate, but in the context of yoga karmasu kaushalam, which we said is dexterity in action, how do we understand this? Any thoughts? So we
Make karma non-binding.
Make karmas non-binding. Yes, beautiful. Yes, it is making karmas non-binding in the sense by not allowing the results of those actions or doing any action with a result in mind. So if we do that, then those karmas becomes a bondage, and we don't want it to become a bondage. So we say the karmas are non-binding. So clearly, yoga karmasu kaushalam, dexterity, when we think about it, we feel that it means that I have to become the expert. And if I'm an expert, I can be dexterous, right? So dexterous, we always use for hands. Ambidextrous, which means I can use both hands. But here it means not just being an expert, but in a sense, anything that I'm doing, I need to do this with an attitude of kartavya karma. Kartavya karma, or in the sense of a duty, considering anything and everything that has been given to me is, it has come to me, so I have to execute it. So in that sense, and to do it not with any likes and dislikes, in the sense, okay, it just came to me, should I do it? All right, let me do it. Not really like that, but really embracing the fact that it has come to me. There's a reason why it came to me. Any particular action, somebody asked me to do a certain seva, or even at work, my boss tells me that he asked me to do something. I just embrace it 100% and I do it. So that is this attitude of kartavya karma. The second thing is I recognize that whatever action I'm doing it, I do it by looking at the person who has given me this duty to do as a person who is divinity personified, for example. So I do it with full devotion. And the third one is, of course, no expectation of anything that's going to come from it. So that's the three things we said for yoga karmasu kaushalam. So again, I'm using this reflection time as a way to key in some very key concepts which are coming in the Bhagavad Gita. So in this regard, I also want to address a question that Sapna Palmer brought up last week, which I thought was a good one. It is in sense relation to this part of it, where when we say that when I do any action, I should do this action without any expectation. That's number one. But also I do it with this idea that with not with the idea of what is in it for me, or this attitude that we sometimes have that, okay, if I'm not going to benefit from doing a particular seva or anything, then why should I do it? So then the question was, what about when I'm working with my own kids, and should I tell my daughter or son that this is expected of him or her? Of course, as parents, we have to do that. And there is no such thing as what is in it for me, because as a parent, I'm given a duty to perform my duty in helping my children, or even at work, I've been given a certain duty to do it. So I do it with that attitude where I have to be forceful in saying what I have to say for the good of whatever needs to be said. But the result of what will happen towards is not in my hands. And that's the no expectation part of it. So thank you, Sapna, for bringing that up. So I wanted to clarify that as well in this context. So we are now looking at this, we are entering into this aspect of where we have Bhagwan Sri Krishna has now explained what is Sankhya Yoga and what is Karma Yoga. Between the two, Karma Yoga is the one which prepares us in such a way that my mind becomes ready for Sankhya Yoga. So Sankhya Yoga is the higher level where it is a vision of realization of myself as to who I am. And in this sense, Karma Yoga gives me the preparatory methods to reach to the level where I can understand the Sankhya vision, which is the means of realization. And when I do this, what happens is I develop this Vairagya for all objects, known or unknown. That was what was discussed in 52 and 53. And once that mind develops the Vairagya for any kind of attachment to the world, at that point, my mind abides in that self, in that absolute self. And that is really the result of Sankhya Yoga. So once having done this, you can see how Lord Krishna spends so much amount of time in preparing Arjuna for this knowledge. You know, he started with Sankhya Yoga, then he discussed about the aspect of dharma, and then finally he discussed about Karma Yoga. When he came to the explanation of Karma Yoga, we find that Arjuna was now sort of ready. He sort of kind of wakes up from his dejected state. And when Krishna says that, you know, just do your duty with a single-minded focus and don't even worry about the results of your work, you know, Arjuna must have kind of, it sort of jogged something in him. And, you know, he must have thought to himself, yeah, Krishna, I think what you're saying makes sense. In theory, it seems okay, but really, how easy is it really to practice this? You're telling me that I should just work, you know, and don't worry about whether it is success or failure, whether it is I'm going to please anyone or not, and I should not be thinking of my results, all that. Okay, great. So this must be somebody called Sthita Prajna, right? Okay. And you're saying that the Sthita Prajna people are happy all the time. So how, I mean, just tell me what does it really mean? And, you know, Arjuna must be thinking about this. So you can see how Krishna has spent all this time to prepare Arjuna. Now, this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is applicable for almost anybody. It is not restricted to certain groups of people or anything. It is available for everybody. However, there are some people who are so much steeped in the world of things that for them, Bhagavad Gita may not necessarily appeal immediately. But for someone like Arjuna who suddenly thinks about everything that Krishna has told him, it kind of now makes sense to him. So he's kind of ready for it. And when you think about, you know, who are the people who want this knowledge and who doesn't, there are some people who think that, you know, I know everything. Do I really need to know this knowledge? It's like, since it's Guruji's birthday, I'm going to tell another Guruji's joke here. So once, you know, a father goes to his son And, his son is a teen, every Friday, he's out, going for a party or anything. But one evening, for some reason, this boy doesn't go. So the father thinks, okay, this is a good time. And so he calls him and he says, son, you're here this evening. Let's talk about life. So the teenager, of course, he thinks he knows everything, right? So he says, all right, Dad, come on. Tell me, what do you want to know about life? I'll tell you. So this is how, totally ignorant people are. They think they know everything. So for them, Bhagavad Gita doesn't really appeal. However, somebody like Arjuna, who is now wanting to improve from where he is, wanting to find an answer, this knowledge is really something he wants to know. And now that Lord Krishna told him about who is Sthita Prajna, or talked to him all about this aspect of Karma Yoga and everything, obviously the next question that comes to his mind is, okay, so tell me, who is this Sthita Prajna? How come he's a person who is so steady, calm in all his things? And how can he be so, he doesn't react to situations? How come he is always friendly to everyone? How come he doesn't mind if somebody is smiling at him or somebody is frowning at him, but he's still very happy with everyone? So we find that in the next 18 verses, there's going to be, Lord Krishna is going to give him all the kind of characteristics. We call this as lakshanas of who is this Sthita Prajna, who is this man or woman or person of realization, and how does this person exhibit all these qualities? And it is not really an easy thing to describe this Sthita Prajna. And we see that Vedavyasa uses this beautiful word picture for discussing all these Sthita Prajna lakshanas. And this word picture is even more kind of, as Gurudev would point out in his book, in his commentary, has pointed out beautifully about how this one, the word picture that Lord Krishna gives Arjuna is much, much superior than even a painting or even a sculpture. Because a sculpture is sort of frozen in stone, right? And even a painting, for example, is only sort of a three-dimensional view. But in this 18 verses, which are highly meditative, and which I guess if we memorize it and if we understand and focus on the meanings, it really can give us a lot of sort of direction in how we want to lead our own lives. So to describe this, to describe really who a Sthita Prajna is, I just want to give you just as an example or an analogy with a small story, if you will. So we find that Lord Krishna, even as he's giving all these lakshanas, for us to really understand where Krishna is taking Arjuna through this 18 verses, it is, this beautiful story of a frog in the well. Really brings out that essence, I think. So once there was this, a nice beach right there. You can see the beach over there. And near the beach, there was this well. And in this well, there was a frog, a frog who was literally a permanent resident, if you will, of this well. And this frog was basically was born in the well. It was brought up there. And the frog had never seen anything of the world except the walls of the well and everything which is in the well. For this frog, the world was this well, and the frog did not know anything beyond this well. So once it so happened that a fish from this sea happened to fall into this well. And when the frog saw this fish, he said, who are you? He said, well, I'm a fish. So then the frog said, where did you come from? He said, well, I just came from the sea. Now, the frog had not seen what the sea means. In fact, this was a huge ocean. And so he asked the fish, you said you're coming from this ocean. Tell me how big is this ocean? And the frog leaped from one side of the well to the other side. And he said, is it as big as this? So the fish said, no, it is much bigger than this. Think about this as maybe 1,000 wells put together. It is that big. And the frog's eyes just bulged and, its mouth just dropped. He said, really? Can you take me there? And so the fish says, okay, sure, I can take you there. And somehow, the fish takes the frog there. Don't ask me how he did, but somehow he did that. And he takes him to the thing. And once he goes there, the frog is totally mesmerized. He is like, okay, I did not even know that this ocean is so huge. And all I knew was this small well in which I was. So this is really how the description of a Sthita Prajna is. The Lakshana of a Sthita Prajna is Sat, Chit, Ananda, and we'll go into a lot of details about what Sat, Chit, and Ananda is. Basically, it is that existence, it is that infinity, and it is that total bliss or total Ananda. That's the Lakshana of a Sthita Prajna. And the difference, like I said, is the difference between the well and the ocean. Today, what we experience in our lives with our experiences can be compared to what the frog was experiencing in that small well. And he thought, this is my world, this is the happiness, and that is what is truly what I should be enjoying. But the fish, the Mahatma, who comes into our lives in the form of scriptures, in the form of Bhagavad Gita, is reminding us that the happiness that we're looking for is me, myself. It is, I'm infinity. My bliss is really overflowing like this ocean or even more. And that is the difference. So this is the essence that in Bhagavad Gita we will be studying. But in this 18 verses, you see the description of this Sthita Prajna, who is all bliss, all infinity and existence, pure existence. So the lakshanas of such a person is being described in these verses. So the Arjuna's question was essentially, Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava stitadi kim prabhasheta kim asita kim vrajeta. So he's asking, tell me the characteristics of this person who you're talking about, O Krishna. How does he really stay within, in his own self? And here you can see how Arjuna is addressing Lord Krishna as Keshava. Now, Keshava is because of the fact that there are, of course, a story on how he got the name Keshava, but Keshava also means that he has beautiful, infinite hair. And in Upanishads, there is a simile which talks about that the entire cosmos is basically the hair on Krishna represents the entire cosmos growing out of his head. And long black hair is always considered as, a mark of beauty. And here, when Arjuna uses this loving term of Keshava, I guess we can visualize Krishna maybe blushing a little bit, under his deep blue complexion, that he's being called as Keshava with somebody with such beautiful hair, right? So Arjuna says, Sthita prajna ka bhasha. Ka bhasha, bhasha typically we say is language, but here he's asking, how do you describe such a person? And so he says, Sthita prajna, whose intellect is firm. Sthita prajna is ka bhasha. How firm is his intellect? And Sthita dihi, he is so rooted in that knowledge. Tell me about such a person who is so rooted in knowledge, somebody who is, when he is by himself or when the person is by himself or herself, that person is in a state of samadhi, that is abiding in hers or his self. But then also tell me, because again, Arjuna is a man of action. He really wants to know, how does this person speak? Sthitadi kim prabhasheta, how does he speak? How does he walk? Asita, how does he sit? Prabhasheta, how does he talk? And then how does he vrajeta kim, how does he walk? So all these questions Arjuna wants to know. So here we find that it's not that Arjuna is asking about, maybe in this case, Arjuna asks this question like how we would ask, because we are asking a question from where we are. For example, if I say that I'm working somewhere, now I would expect the answer to be in the language that I'm used to, right? So I want to know, somebody who's explaining to me will have to tell me in the language that me as an ignorant person, when I say ignorant, in the sense that where I'm ignorant about my true self. So that is how I would be asking, right? But here, Krishna, you see, will be explaining about how a Sthita Prajna is a person who is so well rooted in the knowledge, and he explains as how does he react? How does he react to the world experiences? How does he, when somebody comes to talk to him, how does he talk as a person who is rooted in that knowledge? And when he is by himself or when he's sitting, how does such a person, sit, or how does this person behave when the person is by himself? So all these things is what is being asked, and this is what you see is being explained in the next few verses. So one is from the standpoint of the absolute. The other one is in relation with other things. And a simple example, being a chemist, I guess I can say this. It's like, whenever we want to know about the different elements, like sodium or chlorine or anything, we want to know, okay, what is the atomic number, all that. But next we want to know, how does it react? How does it react with hydrochloric acid or sulfuric? It's the same thing. For example, we can take with any of our software. For example, one thing we know how the software works, but once you put it in the computer, how does it really work with all the other programs, right? So this is the same thing what Arjuna wants to know. First, tell me this person's innate nature, and tell me also how this person reacts to circumstances. That's the question. So we see that in this next few things, we're going to be seeing about this person who is well-rooted in the knowledge, and the person, and the three questions of how is he going to talk, how this one is shown in the various examples here. So we did the shloka we chanted last time. I will just say it. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. So we see Lord Krishna now explaining about, starting with, who is a Sthita Prajna? Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmanyevatmana tushtaha Sthita Prajnasta Prajna Tada Uchyate. So Sthita Prajna Tada Uchyate, that person is called as a Sthita Prajna, who is first of all Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha. Tushtaha indicating that person who is completely contented, completely satisfied by herself or himself, in himself or herself. Atmanyevatmana, Atmana by himself or herself, in Atmanye, in herself. Such a person is a Sthita Prajna. Now, this person is Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha. Before that, we have to explain also, because if you remember, we said that, Lord Krishna wants to explain to Arjuna from where Arjuna is coming from, not from where Lord Krishna is, right? So, for all of us, we are people with a lot of kaman, desires. So we find Sri Bhagavan, Lord Krishna, explaining to Arjuna that a Sthita Prajna is a person who is Prajahati. Prajahati meaning that person who has given up or who has renounced Kaman, which is all the desires, and everything, Sarvan Kaman, Manogatan. Now, where are those desires? Those Kaman are in the mind. So, Manogatan. So, those desires which are in the mind, that one, a person has renounced. So, that's the thing that he's saying. Now, looking at the shloka, somebody may say, well, even I have given up all my desires. I don't really want the pencils or things that I used to want when I was young. Or for that matter, I don't really watch any more TV these days. So, I'm also, am I not a Sthita Prajna then? Or if I say that, okay, I really don't eat sweets anymore. I've given up all sweets. Does that make me a Sthita Prajna here? So here, that is not the idea which is being said in the shloka. What he's trying to say is, the person is these desires do not affect the person. So for this person, whether it is there or it is not there, it doesn't matter. So for us, for example, if I really like my Coke, let's just take an example of Coke, and I go to a party or something like that, and I really wanted Coke, but except Coke, everything else is there, and I find that I'm longing for the Coke, for example. That would be something what we would want, what a non-Sthita Prajna would want. Whereas a Sthita Prajna would be okay with anything that is there, whether it's not there, it doesn't matter. So that's the idea which is said here in this shloka. And in here, also something to be kept in mind is, some people may say that, well, if I see a realized person, I find that this person does everything that even I'm doing. Like, for example, I'm just going to put these examples of, 3 realized masters. There are many, many realized masters. I just picked 3 of them here, which is Bhagwan Ramana Maharishi, Bhagwan Ramakrishna Paramhamsa here, and Tapon Maharaj. So it's not that they did not eat or drink water or anything or sleep. They all went through everything that we all go through also. But the difference is that they did things which was needed to satisfy the need of the body. in order for us, we are being given a body, the body has to be taken care of. So whatever was needed for that, they did that only as a need, as a natural response, not more, nothing else. But in our case, we depend a lot on our external circumstances or things in order for our happiness. And that is something that they don't depend on, because they have recognized that the happiness that they want is part of them. And that is what that sentence, Atmani eva atmana tushtaha, which is said here, Atmanyeva atmana tushtaha. They are totally happy, contented within themselves about who they are, and the happiness comes from within. Whereas for all of us, happiness is when I get something. So when I get something, I get happy, and then I think that happiness is in the object. And then I start looking more and more of that object, or I look more of different kinds of objects in order to get my happiness. So that's not what they're looking for. So for us, that we have to first develop this idea of the fact that the happiness is not in the objects, happiness is within myself, and to be able to practice that. So in that sense, the shlokas which is said here, they offer as a sadhana for ourselves. So, for example, if I'm in a situation where I did not get what I was looking for, this kind of shlokas would tell me that a realized person, they look at happiness within themselves. So, what can I do to get to that level? So, this is the way to look at our own happiness and our own way of doing things. So this is one of the lakshanas, this is the primary lakshana or description of a realized person. That is, such a person, atmanyevatmana tushtaha. Such a person really is so contented within themselves. And because of that contentment, they really do not have a desire for external objects. So that is why they have prajahati yada kaman sarvan partham manogatan, which is the desires of the mind they have been able to renounce for that reason, because they are atmanyevatmana tushtaha. Now let us see in relation to the same sthita prajna, because if you remember, there were 4 questions asked. Each one of those questions are going to be addressed here. So the next one is Dukkeshvanudvikmanaha, Dukkeshvanudvignamanaha, Dukkeshvanudvignamanaha, Sukheshu vigataspruhaha, Sukheshu vigataspruhaha, Vitaragabhaya krodhaha, Vitaragabhaya krodhaha, Sthitadir muni ruchyate, Sthitadir muni ruchyate. So now we are coming to another characteristic or couple of characteristics of the person who is a sthita prajna, or a person of perfection. So what is Lord Krishna saying about such a person? Now, as people living in this transactional world, we go through so many different kinds of experiences. So here, Lord Krishna is saying, Dukkeshu indicating those experiences which are sorrowful. So Dukkeshu anudvigna manaha. So in all those experiences which are sorrowful, which are sad, the sthita prajna person, the person's mind, she or he remains, sorry, I'm trying to remove this here. She or he remains totally unshaken. Totally unshaken. on the same lines, when something is going really good, sukheshu, sukha, in sukham, vigata sprihaha. Vigata sprihaha, vigata indicating the person without, vigata meaning without, sprihaha meaning the person does not, keep jumping up and down. So anudvigmana manaha meaning the person is not agitated, and sukheshu vigata sprihaha, such a person is totally remaining at ease. Now, when we think about experiences for us, common people, of course, for Arjuna too, we are all like Arjunas here. The kind of the experiences which we go through are typically three different kinds. The ones which are Adi Bhautika indicating which involves all beings, all objects in the world. Many of our experiences, most of it is actually Adi Bhautika. Another kind of experience is the Adi Daivika. Adi Daivika indicating that those experiences which are connected to the forces of nature. For example, just last Friday, Saturday, we had heavy rains, flooding, literally flooding in so many parts of Michigan, right? So unexpected, but that is all Adi Devika. In some other place, again, during winter time, sometimes we're hit with snowstorms. In some other places, they are hit with, tornadoes. All this is Adi Devika. And Adhyatmika are the third kind of experiences, which is from within us. For example, all the things, whether it is my own things that, whether I go through a stomachache or anything, or at my mind level, when I either get agitated because somebody didn't smile at me, or if I'm going through any kind of financial problems, if I am not able to handle it, all these things are within myself. So that is the dukkeshu anudvigmana manaha. So in all these cases, a sthita prajna person is completely detached. The person is not affected at all, because the person knows that all these things are temporary. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes things are good, sometimes things are not so good. So the person is able to handle that really well. And so it's again, as I discussed previously, about who is a sthita prajna. Sthita prajna is a person who is rooted in the knowledge, and such a person is doesn't react to any of these things, to any of the joy or sorrow that is happening around. And such a person, the second line, for example, so that is about the first line. And the second line, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodaha Sthita Dihi Munihi Uchyate. So such a person, in the first one, we found that as a qualification. The second one is a person who is free from Vita, which is free from Raga. Raga indicating attachment, Bhaya indicating fear, and Krodaha indicating anger. So such a person is free from all this. Now one may say, I go through so many emotions. It's not just these three. But again, Bhagavad Gita being what it is, where the words are so carefully chosen, and if we were to look at all the emotions we go through, it can literally fall under these three things. And in fact, it is probably starting with one biggest one, which is the attachment, raga. That is the one which is the culprit, which leads to this fear and anger. Simple example, let us see about how these three work together. Let us say, for example, my teenage son, decided that he wanted to go out for a party or something. And you had told him, I had told him that, well, you have to come home by, say, 8 o'clock. Now, 8:30, 9 o'clock, he's not home yet. And in my mind, there's already all these pictures of the ambulance going across, or maybe I have to go to the police, or even thinking about the hospitals, where I may have to go. All these things comes into my mind. And this is all because of an attachment. And once this happens, then what happens is there is a fear that it's the fear that something has happened, right? And this fear, now let's say that your son does come back after some time. Now you're really angry. How come you stayed so late? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you text me? All these things happens, right? So this is how this cycle of attachment, it's not a cycle, but it's the fall. It's a ladder of fall, if you will. There is an attachment. Anything, if you think about it, first, the problem starts with the attachment. And then next, it leads to fear. And finally, there is anger when something really happens. Another example is probably, if I have a lot of money in the bank, and suddenly I hear about the fact that this bank is not doing that well. So then what happens? I'm afraid that I'm going to lose all this money here. So, and if something did happen, then I get angry that, how come this bank did not notify us or anything? So you can analyze this for any situation, that these three things happens all the time for all the experiences that we go through when something doesn't go well. So, but then here, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna that a sthita prajna, a man or woman of perfection, is a person who is completely free from attachment to any of these objects or beings. Now, that doesn't mean that the person is, has this lackadaisical attitude in this. No. In fact, such a person has a lot of love for everything which is going on. And we will be seeing that in the shlokas coming forward, moving on. But in the shloka, he says that a person who is a muni, such a person is a muni. Muni, or a person of sage, of steady wisdom. So this person of perfection is called as muni. Such a person is free from attachment with all this, and who is also not affected by the ups and downs of the experiences in life. So next, having described the sthita prajna, Lord Krishna goes on to answer the other questions of Arjuna. And here in this one, we see how he's explaining about how does this person interact in the world. And that is, so when he says, Prabhash Seta Kim, which is the question that Arjuna asked, he says, Yes sarvatra ani abhisnehaha, Yes sarvatranabhisnehaha, Yes sarvatranabhisnehaha, tat tat prapya shubha shubham, tat tat prapya shubha shubham, nabhinandati nadveshti, nabhinandati nadveshti, tasya prajna pratisthita, tasya prajna pratisthita. So again, the last line, he's explaining about tasya prajna, such a person whose prajna or wisdom is steady, pratishtita, who's very steady, who's very firm. Such a person is everywhere without attachment. Yaha, that person, sarvatra, everywhere, anabhisnehaha. So such a person is there everywhere without any attachment. Tat tat prapya shubha shubham. And even when such a person has, meets any kind of experiences, anybody or anything, such a person is totally detached with all these things. So this really applies to anybody. It doesn't matter who the person is. Totally, no gender, no bias at all. The person, anybody, when such a person meets anybody in any different circumstances, such a person is remains the same in Shubham and Ashubham. Shubham indicating conducive circumstances, or Ashubham indicating non-conducive circumstances. Such a person is neither too elated, nor does, just person remains the same. We can see these examples in so many different lives of so many saints. Many of the saints, they go through so many different circumstances. And in all these circumstances, the person remains completely unaffected, because again, the person is reveling in their own self, atmanyeva atmana tushtaha. So such a person remains the same for all this. And that is what is shown in this. Such a person is tasya prajna pratishta. The wisdom is, person is rooted in that knowledge and remains unaffected. Now, let's see from now, the next 6 verses, we see Lord Krishna explaining about this question which Arjuna asks as Kim Asita, how does such a person sit? Now here, sitting doesn't necessarily mean, such a person is, sitting on a chair or is sitting on a padmasana or something like that. But the whole idea here is when such a person is by themselves or in solitude, when no one is around, how does this person really behave? That's what he's trying to show here. So he's trying to show, let's do the shloka here. Yada samharate chayam, yada samharate chayam, kurmonganiva sarvashaha, kurmonganiva sarvashaha, indriyani indriyarthebhyaha, indriyani indriyarthebhyaha, tasya prajna pratisthita, tasya prajna pratisthita. Again, the question here is tasya prajna pratisthita. So the person who is steady in that knowledge, such a person, indriyani indriyarthebhyaha, such a person is totally detached from the fascination in the world. So our 5 senses are so drawn towards new objects. So today we have the companies who do a great job with marketing the products. They know exactly what you want. It's like this, when I've seen this happening to me, for me itself, if I go to a certain website looking for a product, I was just in the website the other day looking at a particular meditation app. And lo and behold, the next thing I find that when I open my Facebook, that app had its advertisement in Facebook. How does this person know even that I was looking at? How does Facebook know what's happening here, right? So now, because I looked at the app and because I was on Facebook, now you see how by repeatedly putting that in front of me, I can get attracted towards it, and somehow it creates a vasana in me at some point, right? So this is how we get attracted to the world of its senses and sense objects. But here he's giving us this, Lord Krishna is trying to give us a beautiful simile to show how a person of self-perfection does not get affected by anything and is able to maintain that balance within herself or himself. And for this, he gives this example of a tortoise. So just as samharate, just as samharate chayam, samharate meaning withdrawing, when kurmonganiva, kurma indicating this tortoise, kurmonganiva sarvashaha, when we see this tortoise, you see this shell here, we always find this tortoise with this shell around it. And the shell is something, whenever the tortoise is not doing anything, it always has a shell around, and it just protects itself from a shell, protects itself with the shell. So Lord Krishna is trying to show about how that a Sthita Prajna person is one who has this shell of detachment around herself or himself. And by having this detachment, such a person is able to sort of retract from the world, just like this tortoise does by taking all its 4 limbs and its head and the tail, all 6 of them, it just brings it under the shell. So this person is able to bring that and is able to move around the world without being affected by anything that is coming out in front of us. Such a person is so totally detached and is so safe and secure that nothing can really affect it. Whereas for us, our sense objects in the world acts as a fascination, and our 5 senses is constantly going out trying to embrace the things around us. So that is the aspect which Lord Krishna is warning, is telling Arjuna that a Sthita Prajna is a person who has a shell of security and doesn't allow anything to disturb. So with that, we finish 58 up to 58 here, and we'll continue with the next Lakshanas. In the meantime, I just want to address one question of Ganga here, Ganga Radhakrishnan. I wanted to put that in. I didn't get a chance, but I will bring it out from my WhatsApp here. So Ganga had asked this question about, as we are in this process of the quest of knowledge, can you explain how does the confusion arise and lead us to the down path? And really, what is super consciousness? Now, the term super consciousness was used in a couple of shlokas, but specifically in this shloka, which is Arjuna's question in 54, in shloka 54, where he says, Samadhis tasya Keshava, and that was translated as the superconscious state. So superconscious state is that state of really the absolute reality, the state of, we call that as maybe the Turiya state, or the state of my true being. That is the absolute reality. That state is called as the superconscious state. This probably can be distinguished by the state where we say I'm conscious of something. When I say I'm conscious of something, that is just in the transactional world, where I say that I know something. But superconscious state is that Turiya state, or the 4th plane of consciousness. So a person of steady realization, a person of man of realization, or a person of perfection, a person of realization, constantly operates from that, is aware of that person's state, or the absolute state. And when the person is by herself or himself, is always in that state of samadhi, which is the super consciousness state. Now, how did we all drop to where we are? That is really coming up in the 3rd chapter also, when we discuss more about karma. But the whole idea of how did we have the downfall is where we have forgotten really our real nature, and we have identified ourselves more with our transactional nature, and we've considered our transactional nature, which is this body, mind, and intellect, and the Sunitha persona that I've taken, as my real nature. So that is how the downfall really has happened. And now it is, Bhagavad Gita is trying to show us truly what is our real nature and how we can put the effort to recognize our true nature through Karma Yoga. And through Karma Yoga, when I try to purify my mind becomes more and more ready for Shravanam. And Shravanam is this listening aspect where I recognize really what my true nature is. And I start working towards it by purifying my mind. And through Samkhya Yoga, I understand my true nature. And through Mananam and Nididhyasanam, which we covered last week, we will recognize our true nature and we come out of this downfall where I have fallen into. So with that, we'll finish. And next week, I know I put this date as 7/7, but just now I was reminded that our Balaji temple has an anniversary celebration starting on Wednesday. So we will not meet on July 7th. On contrary, we will meet on Tuesday, July 6th. So we're going to meet on July 6th, Tuesday, for our session at the same time. This is just one time, just for next Tuesday alone. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah. Sarve santuni. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate. Purnasya purnamadaya purnameva vashishyate. Om shanti shanti shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hari Om, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Hari Om, thank you.
Hari
Hari Om, Sunitha Grandhee.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, thank you.
Hari Om. Thank you very much. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Thank you,
Hari Om.
Sunitha ji.
Hari Om Ganga.
Thank you, Sunitha.
Hari Om Anita. Hari Om Jayashri.
Thank you, Sunitha ji.
Hari
Hari
Om.
Om.
Surya. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
See you. See you
Hari
everyone.
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Bye.